A bit scary being up here. I discovered, when I was on maternity leave, I discovered social media, addicted to Twitter. And during that experience, I found lots of people with shared interests. And I had an assumption based on my own learning experiences about what PBS practitioners, what their background was, what their training was in the UK, and I was completely wrong. And this is how we developed PBS chat on Twitter and Facebook, which Jonathan's going to talk about a bit later. But from this, we had lots of issues that came up. We wanted to find out what the qualifications, what the training, and what the supervision is like at the moment for PBS practitioners in the UK. For various reasons, really. PBS is on the agenda post-Winterbourne. A few people were talking about this yesterday and saying there's almost a plan to roll out positive behaviour support without looking at what competencies people should have, what skills current practitioners actually have. There are various projects at the moment looking at the implementation and expansion of positive behaviour support. And at the moment we're not a protected field, but we work with some of the most vulnerable people. So our role and our experiences and our training and how we're regulated is incredibly important. And some of my experiences with social media, with Twitter and Facebook, highlighted some concerns, what positive behaviour support is and what positive behaviour support isn't. And that was new to me coming from the behaviour analytic field. And I think what we really need to know is, are we ready as a field to take on this huge challenge that's coming up, and are we competent? So our research aims were to replicate a study that Gillian Martin carried out in 2012 in the Republic of Ireland, which had some really interesting results, to identify the training skills and duties of existing practitioners and to investigate how they fit in to current service structures, and to make sure that as a field we're safe and we are meeting the demands, meeting the training needs, meeting the supervision needs of people, particularly if we're looking at expanding. So we did a web-based survey. We had 327 participants. They were allowed to skip questions, and our average response rate per question was 76%. The survey was shared on social media. It was shared by a variety of organisations and mailing lists with that were relevant to positive behaviour support in the UK. Practitioners had to be working in a role where they were actually implementing behaviour support, and they had to be based in the UK. As far as we're aware of, this is the largest study of this kind, and thinking about the number of attendees at the conference, we had double the number actually respond to this survey. So even though it's just a small kind of dip in the water, it's still a large response that we had. So what we found out was that we are mainly female. 71% of positive behaviour practitioners that completed the survey were female. 32% were from a nursing background, 24% from applied behaviour analysis background, and or 15% with psychology. 48% of people have been working in the field for over 15 years. So we've got lots of very experienced practitioners in their roles, mainly working with adults, some working with adults and children, and in a variety of different services. So NHS or community-based residential services, in people's homes, supported living, and working in special schools as well. Most of the participants had either been in there, quite new to their roles, so it's 1 to 3 years. 29% of people have been in their role for 1 to 3 years, and 24% have been in for over 10 years. So it seems that our field is, we've got a good balance of people that have been doing this for a long time and people that are quite new to this. In terms of the professional background, this was a massive surprise to me in my ABA bubble. I just assumed that everyone who was doing behaviour analysis was a BCBA or from a behaviour analyst background. So we had 35% that are from a nursing background, just under 25% from behaviour analyst background, and we've got psychology, service managers, support workers, and others. And others included things like teachers, speech and language therapists, and occupational therapists that would describe their role as positive behaviour support. We looked at professional accreditation. just over 10% are regulated by the BACB, a large percentage in line with where people's backgrounds are from with the Nursing and Midwifery Council. The HCPC is the new term. And this was our big surprise, really. We've got over 40% of practitioners who have no professional accreditation at the moment. Some of the accreditation that people had, like the British Psychological Society, as far as I'm aware, isn't a regulatory body. And we had people who would say, I'm registered with BUILD, or I'm registered with the UK Society of Behaviour Analysis. So there's lots of confusion around what regulations people currently have. So 41% of people working with our most vulnerable individuals have got no registration with a regulated professional body. And those that haven't, 39% said that they were currently pursuing registration. This obviously has massive implications for our field. In terms of what we do all day, this was over a 12-month period. We asked people how many functional assessments have you completed in the last 12 months as part of your role. The average number that came back was 13. Number of consultations, the average was 31. What we asked was that one issue or case would be classed as one consultation. So this gives a bit of an idea about people's caseloads. So our average caseloads are 31 for people that responded. Less than half of those had a functional assessment. In terms of our duties, we asked people what their current duties are and how this matches up to what we feel they should be doing. The job titles of PBS practitioners varied considerably. There was no consistency, and behavioural therapists, behaviour analysts, PBS specialists, there's all sorts of different roles, which I think for our consumers makes things very, very difficult and very complicated. 80% described their role as positive behaviour support, and then we asked how frequently they included certain recommendations in behaviour support plans. So 94% frequently or always include changes to the environment, 89 changes to triggers, 85 teaching new skills, provide scheduled reinforcement 64, 50% guidelines for consequences or restraint. So as the technical skills increase, the usage of these strategies actually seem to reduce. In terms of minimum standards, we have people from the ABA background. We have the BACB, which talks about competencies that a practitioner should have in order to be regulated or in order to have that accreditation. As far as I'm aware, there is no comparison with any of the other professional backgrounds. We desperately need minimum standards. We have, in just the ones that we have for the BACB, guidelines for responsible conduct, professional disciplinary and ethical standards, and professional and ethical compliance code. One thing that we've experienced on social media, and Carl talked about this a little bit yesterday, is that there are lots of people who are doing positive behaviour support that think they're not doing applied behaviour analysis, and that positive behaviour support has values, but applied behaviour analysis has no values. And here, Skinner said it first, we are a values-based science. We need to depolarize the issue between ABA and positive behaviour support. Looking at Gores Paper from 2013 that Carl also mentioned yesterday, there's just a few things that kind of pull out here. We've got the primary use of applied behaviour analysis, we've got functional assessment that should inform any interventions, and we should proactively and reactively manage behaviour. From the feedback and the results that we had, it was clear that some of this isn't actually occurring. There's lots of inconsistencies with what positive behaviour support actually is and should be doing. So we looked at the duties and responsibilities. What are people's ideal duties? How important do you find these things? And how much of your actual time is spent doing these things? So there isn't that much of a mismatch here, which was a massive surprise to me. I'd like to know where people are working, because I want a job there. There are lots of people are managing to spend the time doing what they feel is important, so things like supporting or consulting with staff teams, the assessments, the training, and directly working with clients, which is really, really great. terms of where we fit into service structures, this was quite difficult to categorise because, as I said earlier, people's job titles varied considerably. It was hard to see what kind of background that they came from. So we have got lots of people that are working alone and lots of people that are working as sole behaviour analysts within a multidisciplinary team. So with people working in isolation or without peer support, the access to peer clinical supervision is really important. So we've got 11% of people at least from the categories that we had working alone, and lots of people who are within a team, or an NHS might employ a behaviour analyst, but they're unsupported, they're their own behaviour analyst, and I know I've spoken to lots of people where that's an issue for them. 84% of people report to their line managers, 63% report to a clinical supervisor, 69% of those clinical supervisors have specialist training in behaviour or specialist training in behavioural analysis. So only 37% of our practitioners are receiving behaviour-specific supervision. One of the things that was commented on and that I got from the results of this survey were that people's classification of what behaviour-specific supervision was varied. So some people would say, oh yeah, my supervisor's been on a 4-day course, or my supervisor's a positive handling instructor. So some of that may not actually be behaviour-specific supervision, because there's lots of misconceptions around what that should be and what that should look like. The majority of people access that clinical supervision monthly. 53% access external supervision or support relating to their work, and this was things like a colleague in the same position, so informal supervision. A colleague in the same position tends to be our most popular way of gaining some peer support. Peer supervision forums, individual supervision from a senior clinician, web-based forums, and group supervision from a senior clinician. This tended to occur either weekly or monthly. 82% of practitioners want to do some further training. This varied really in what kind of things people wanted to do, so like autism, play therapy, health, eating disorders, organisational behaviour management, acceptance and commitment therapy, verbal behaviour. And as I said earlier, this positive handling was coming up a lot. People seem to think positive behaviour support and positive handling were almost the same in some ways. And 48% feel that they have other needs in order to fulfil their role professionally, so supervision, time, qualifications and training, and access to the literature. 22% of people are actually doing further training at the moment. So of those 82, 22 are actually having their training needs met. In terms of what we do with this information, we definitely need and desperately need to develop peer support for people in the roles that we're in. Internet resources is another area that we could develop. Best practice guidelines are essential, and future development of teams. We need to look at how people are supported in their teams, how they're managed, how they're trained, and how they're supervised. In terms of peer support's really important. The networking, new developments, mutual support, problem solving, effective and best practice and information sharing. Everybody's here and networking today and probably making links with other professionals and getting to know about different areas and people doing similar roles in your areas. But restrictions make it difficult to meet face-to-face. We've got big caseloads, we're very busy, and people are often darting all over the place and driving all over the country. So internet resources like Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook, particularly the PBS chat Jonathan's going to talk about later, ABI Ireland, there's lots of applied behaviour analysis groups and pages on Facebook, and journal clubs as well that people are accessing now. In terms of networking, we've got things like ABAF, the Applied Behaviour Analysis Forum that organises, EABG, which we're all at today, the UK SBA workshops, I think we're on the third ones that are occurring in May, and lots of different training events as well. One of the things people identified was that they either don't have time to go to these things, don't have the funding, or they just don't know about them because they're not linked in with the different networks, which is why the the internet can be really helpful in alerting people to these things. Best practice guidelines, we've got our own professional guidelines and ethical codes if we're in a regulated position. The BACB has really clear guidelines. I know there's lots of controversy, probably just on Facebook and Twitter, but lots of controversy about ABA at the moment, and we're radical and we're mean and we use punishment, but actually if somebody spends some time and reads through this, they're really comprehensive and very positive and very values-led. Association of Professional Behaviour Analysts, and lots of journals as well that we can be reading to keep on top of what's going on in our practice. So to summarise, we've got a wide variety of skills and professional affiliations amongst our current behaviour practitioners. We found that there were lots of issues in relation to obtaining appropriate supervision, and I think this is an issue for those of you that are trying to get your BCBA hours. I know this is a massive issue, so if you're not looking for those hours and you're looking for a professional supervisor, that's probably even more difficult. Lots of needs that practitioners have got in order to fulfil their posts effectively, and standards and systems necessary for current and future practitioners. We've got a lot of work to do with our current PBS practitioners before we start expanding and adding people to the field, because they're not going to be well supported, and we don't really have the mentors that can help people through those positions. There are some limitations. It is a relatively small sample size, and we don't know who completed these responses and if they were honest in their responses. In terms of looking to the future, it's got a bit of a to-do list of opportunities really for the field. We need PBS training courses. We need competencies that are in line with those training courses, so that we know that people that are then calling themselves PBS practitioners have met a certain criteria. Accreditation of courses, standards, dissemination, which again is what Jonathan will be talking about, mentoring and supervision, consistency and agreement as a field. We keep having this big debate about ABA and PBS and who can do PBS and who shouldn't be doing PBS, whereas we just need consistency and agreement so that we can move forward. If we can't agree as a field, we're making ourselves incredibly vulnerable to external professionals and to local authorities. Peer supervision sessions. One solution may be to hold regional peer supervision sessions. I was lucky enough to find some great people on Twitter that I now link up with, but they're still miles away from where I am. So if there were regional support groups, that would be incredibly beneficial. I think there is, Nick will probably know more about this, a UK SBA special interest group for positive behaviour support.
Yeah. It's not live, but it's
not
live.
live.
Yeah. I've been waiting for some of the other six to.
Does someone have to be a BCBA or have behaviour analyst training to access that?
To access it, no.
No, so you can, any PBS practitioner could register with that group.
Yeah.
Okay. And the HCPC, I know this was talked about 2 EABGs ago, where we were seeking HCPC registration, but as far as I'm aware, they've closed applications, so that's on hold at the moment. But there are lots of opportunities and things that we need to do as a field in terms of moving forward. Okay, we're going to take questions at the end. Thank you all for listening.